I'm trying to get harder and tougher mentally and physically every day of my life.
You're either the growth mindset or you're the fixed mindset.
If you're trying to be the best, you need to look at who the best is and see what they do.
Relentless pursuit of progress.
There's a difference between the best and the rest.
Welcome to the Brute Strength Podcast.
Champions are built in the mind first.
Where we interview scientists, world champions, doctors, and experts in just about every area of health and fitness.
What do you care enough about? What are you fascinated enough about to go so deep and learn so much that you'll know more about it than anyone else?
And now, here's your host, Michael Cazayoux.
Hey, this is Michael Cazayoux. You're listening to the Brute Strength Podcast. Today, I'm joined by PJ Nestler. PJ is the Director of Performance at XPT, which stands for Extreme Performance Training. I think I said extreme. Extreme, you get it. Performance training started by Laird Hamilton and Gabby Reese. Before joining them, he had his own business. He's also worked with, as a sports performance expert, he's trained dozens of athletes from the NFL, NHL, MLB, and he's worked with over 100 fighters, including top 10 ranked UFC fighters and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world champions. What drew me to PJ was his work on breath work. For years, I've dabbled in so many different forms of breath work, from mindfulness meditation, where you only focus on your breath, to where you focus on physical sensations throughout your body, to Wim Hof breathing, to pranayama, or breath of fire in the yoga traditions. I've done, I think, everything under the sun. I've dabbled in all of them. And what I've never been able to find is one like manual or one school of thought that studies all of the different forms of breath work and explains when to use each of them. I've had profound experiences in my own life through meditation mostly, but with other forms of breath work as well. And I have just been yearning to learn how to further optimize their impact in my life and how I'm using them in my life. I've seen them have a huge effect on my performance, my state of well-being in general, my level of presence and awareness of different thoughts, emotions, behavior patterns, you name it. These things have had a profound impact in my life. And so I sought him out because this is exactly what he's done. One of the things he's done in his time at XPT is he's done a very thorough research of all of the different forms of breathwork, and he has created a comprehensive, a cohesive school of thought around when to use each of them, when not to use certain ones. And so as I was preparing for this, I thought, why don't we shake things up even further and have him do a couple guided breathwork sessions on the show. And my thought process with that was, when a lot of people think of breathwork, it just sounds like the most boring thing on the planet. It's like hearing from someone like, you need to go drink more water. That's going to have a huge impact on your life. It just sounds so boring that most people never even give it a shot. It's a very experiential sort of thing. You can't really understand the potential impact until you've experienced it yourself. So on this show, the majority of the show is spent around two separate breathing protocols. One in the sympathetic state, so to heighten your level of arousal to kind of pump you up, and one for the parasympathetic state to downregulate, to relax yourself, prepare for sleep, recovery, etc. And so we do these two different protocols separately, and then we go into what happened physiologically, psychologically, when are they best used for, when not used for, and throughout the entire episode, we're talking about what's going on in your body and your mind. So without further ado, please help me welcome PJ Nestler. This episode is also brought to you by Jumbo CBD. If you're not already on the CBD train, then I'm sure you've at least heard of it before, because many people thought in the beginning that this was just a legal way to get high. And unfortunately for some of you, you can't get high on CBD. You can try, but you can't get high on it. On the other hand, it can help you sleep better. It can reduce stress and anxiety. It can be huge for pain relief and reducing inflammation. Personally, I've had knee pain for about 5 years now, and I haven't been able to figure out a way to get rid of it. I haven't figured out the root cause. I've worked with PTs and chiropractors, and I just haven't been able to eradicate it. So I have used some pain relieving techniques, and this is one of them. I've used Jumbo's extra strength 200 milligram balm, and it absolutely does not completely take the pain away, but it makes it manageable. It allows me to get into a deeper squat. It allows me to walk around and just go about my daily activities without feeling much pain at all. And whether that's placebo or not, I really don't care because I just don't feel like I'm in as much pain. I've also used their sprays, and there's a really subtle relaxing effect to the sprays. So that's pretty great. It's helpful for sleep and reduces a little bit of like a feeling of tension in my chest, which I often call anxiety. It's great for athletes and recovery. And some specifics and what sets Jumbo apart is that they have 100% natural ingredients, full spectrum CBD sourced from Colorado and Oregon. They have CO2 extracted oils that are, I think, safer. They have therapeutic grade essential oils in a lot of their products, third-party lab tested, so it's legit. And they're one of the first CBD companies to post their lab results publicly. I also know the owners of this company very well. They're very close friends of mine, and I trust them deeply. Again, my favorite product of theirs is the 200 milligram extra strength balm. I've also used the sprays, but they also have drops and butters or ghee. I think ghee is like a butter type thing. So there's all sorts of different products. And they're offering you 15% off of anything in their store. And you can get access to that by going to jumbocbd.com and use the code BRUTE in all caps. That's BRUTE in all caps. A couple more things. So a huge plus of their sprays and drops is that they use MCT oil. So since CBD is a fat soluble molecule, it binds with this oil and allows for much more rapid and effective absorption of the actual CBD. It also has essential oils that add flavor, and they bring their own proven health benefits as well. With the Muscle Bomb, since they use ghee as the base, again, ghee is like a butter type thing, the CBD is binding with the ghee fat, and it's able to be carried all the way to the bones. Ghee itself has amazing topical healing properties, and when CBD is added, the results can be pretty profound. So again, you can get access to this discount, 15% off of all of their products by going to jumbocbd.com and enter the code BRUTE, all caps, at checkout. Go get them. PJ, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks so much for having me. Excited to be here.
I'm stoked to do this with you, brother. So, listeners, we are going to shake things up a little bit. I was telling PJ that I was a little over caffeinated yesterday as I was preparing for this, and I had the idea to do something a little bit different on the show. So PJ is an expert in a lot of things related to kinesiology and sport performance. And one of the things he's best known for, and the way that I first heard about him, is his work on breath work and the work that he's doing at XPT on breath work. And so we're going to do a couple different breathing protocols for different intents that can be done at different times for different reasons. And I really recommend, if you can, put this show on pause and listen to this in a time where you can sit down. You probably don't want to do this while you're driving. You're welcome to, but we take no responsibility for what happens there. So do this while you're sitting, in a comfortable spot, maybe before a workout, something like that. And let's get to it, man. So before we get into the actual protocols, let's lay a little bit of groundwork. So you've been with XPT for a couple years, and I think you have a pretty funny story of the job interview that started it all off. Tell us about that.
Right. Yeah. I joined XPT back in 2017, and at the time I had just quit my job running a few sports performance facilities to start my own company based on trainer education. I've been doing that for like 6 months. Things were going really well. I was running mentorship programs for coaches and trainers. And then I was reached out to by one of the investors in XPT who said, hey, we have this cool company with Laird Hamilton and Gabby Reese. We're looking for somebody to help systematize all the things that they do. And, sounded exciting. And I was a fan of Laird Hamilton. So I'm like, yeah, I'm interested. Let's check it out. So he's like, well, we'd love to send you up to Laird's house and, learn about what the whole program's about and see if you're interested and, what you think of it. So I'm like, well, that sounds cool. So I head up to Malibu one day and I get there and a little nervous, intimidated. I'm about to meet Laird Hamilton and Gabby Reese and no idea what I'm getting into. All I've seen from XPT is a few videos online. I am by no means a water person at all. I mean, I've spent my life in the gym. So I was a surfer, but like not super comfortable in the water, holding my breath. So a little intimidated by that part. So I show up
like
there.
Driving up to Laird Hamilton's house as a surfer?
I mean, I was super excited about that because I had gotten into surfing probably 5 years before that. I watched all the movies with Laird. I mean, my roommate and I, a few months before that, had been watching Riding Giants and, talking about Laird Hamilton. So just the fact that I was going to go meet him was super cool. And I had known who Gabby was. So that was really cool. I was a little intimidated about that part, but a little more intimidated because I knew I was going up to train with them. I wasn't going up to just have a conversation, but they were going to tell me about the company and I was going to learn what it was about. So I got up there and they were amazing people. And when I first walked in, I remember Gabby's like, oh, you must be PJ. She came and gave me a big hug. She's like, Laird's down there by the pool. So I went down there. It's probably 7:30 in the morning. And I went down to the pool and Laird starts talking to me right away about XPT and some of the stuff they do. And he's got the sauna cranked up and people are showing up to the house there, a bunch of his friends. A bunch of big name celebrities are walking in and I'm like, people are just kind of grabbing stuff and grabbing weights, getting in the pool. And Laird's like, oh, we're going to hop in the sauna first. So I sit in the sauna and there's a few people in there and Laird just starts telling me all about XPT and what it's about. And after about maybe 8 to 10 minutes, I'm like, oh, man, this is a brutal sauna. I look at the temperature gauge, it's like 230. And I'm like, man, I haven't been in a sauna this hot in my life. This is crazy. And Laird's just telling me about all the stuff they're doing and what the things they're creating and the retreats they run. I get about 15 minutes in and I'm like, I think I'm going to pass out in here. But I'm sitting eye to eye with Laird Hamilton as he's talking. And that all I'm thinking is, well, this guy does this all the time. He could probably stay in for half an hour. How long are we going to be in here? And so within the first 20 minutes, I'm already thinking, all right, well, I'm not going to be the guy who gets out. Everyone else seems to be fine in here. So I'm passing out in here. I might die in here, but I'm staying. Like, I'm not going to, I definitely can't get out. So in my head, I don't think I listened to a word he said after the first 10 minutes because I was just trying to keep myself from like blacking out in there. We get out and they've got the ice baths full and just more ice than I've ever seen in the tub. He's like, all right, we're going to pop in here. So we go to get in. Yeah, we get in the ice baths. He's still talking to me. We're in ice baths next to each other. He's still talking like he's in like we're sitting in a hot tub. Mm-hmm. I'm in there like close to blacking out, feeling like I can't see straight. My feet are on fire. And by the time I was in the ice bath, I was already thinking, these people are crazy. I don't want to be a part of this company. I don't need this. I got my own company. I'll go back to my comfort zone. And then we got in the pool and same thing. I was, I'm at the bottom of Laird's 12-foot pool with Laird and Gabby standing above me. I'm holding 40-pound dumbbells, walking and jumping at the bottom, having a panic attack every 10 seconds because I can't, I'm not used to holding my breath or just all of the things. And there was not really, it's funny because after that, Gabby was telling me like Laird doesn't really know what's hard for people. For Laird, it's like, well, yeah, just grab that and do it. So he just kind of throws you in. There's no like, hey, this might be challenging. If something goes wrong, it's just like, all right, grab those weights and go down and do 15 jumps. So I remember leaving there. We probably worked out for an hour and a half. And I left there like, I was like, wow, that was super cool because this was all so new to me. And I've been in the performance world for 12 years and none of what we did was even I had any remote experience with. And then 2, I was like, these people are out of their minds and I don't want to be a part of this. Like my mind was just go back to what you do. You train athletes. You don't need to do this crazy stuff. And But that was kind of a big, from the time I left the house, it's probably a 3-hour ride home from Malibu. By the time I got home, I was like, this is something I need to do. This is so far out of my comfort zone that there's so much opportunity for growth here for me. I need to be around these people that are doing this crazy stuff so I can learn more about it. You know, it was funny, the transition in my mind, but I remember thinking of the whole time, like, I don't want to be a part of this. Like, this is crazy. I don't need to be doing this kind of pool stuff and these ice baths and all this crazy stuff. But yeah, it was a pretty awesome experience. And from that point forward, the more I started digging into this stuff, it significantly changed my life in a lot of different areas. So I think that's why I'm so passionate about it and so excited to share it with people.
That's amazing. So what comes to mind for me is like, if you were to do a drag show, that would be way outside of your comfort zone. So like, what else was it about that experience that made you think, I really need this to be a big part of my life?
It was checking the reality for me that, like, I always told myself I push myself out of my comfort zone. I'm mentally tough, you know, all those things, because I work out hard in the gym. I push myself to my maximum ability. I train jujitsu. I train MMA. I fight with people. I do all these hot, intense things. So I was like, I'm somebody who pushes the threshold. And then what I realized was the gym is my comfort zone. Like, yeah, I push myself all out on the assault bike, but I know exactly how hard people should be able to work. And there's no fear there. It's just hard work. But when I was up at Laird and Gabby's and I was put in the pool and I was put in the ice bath and the sauna, I was fearful. I had anxiety. I all of those things that were so far out of my comfort zone, I was forced to deal with. And I was forced to, you know, in the pool especially, to have to check in and be like, every 15 seconds I got to the point of like, I can't do this, you know, and I want to quit. And that doesn't happen for me on the bike or in jujitsu. You know, it might be hard in jujitsu, but there's never a point of like, I can't do this, I have to stop. And that's what I had to face over and over and over and over and over in that hour and a half at Laird and Gabby's house. And that's what the ride home made me realize, like, there's so much more room for growth for me as a person, you know, outside of professional, outside of career. And I knew that, you know, the career thing too, I started thinking like, man, I don't know anything about this stuff. Who am I to come in and be the director of performance, teaching people about these things? I spent 12 years training athletes. I could teach you how to train a guy for the NFL Combine, but I don't know anything about ice baths and the physiology behind them and how to do them and why and all that. So that was the other thing for me, is I had a lot of doubt in myself and my abilities to even do the job. So there was just a lot of fear and a lot of insecurity there that I was forced to face. And that's luckily I was courageous enough to lean into it, because there was so much growth on the other side of it.
Yeah, good for you, man. How many people did he interview that passed out or quit or didn't make it through?
I don't know how many people that actually were sent up there. I mean, I know the investors had spoken to a few other performance coaches and people for that role, but I don't know how many people actually went and met Laird and Gabby or did any of that stuff. Yeah, maybe there's one or two guys still up there somewhere that didn't make it, and they're buried in the backyard. And sure. that's why we don't talk about them.
So that's an awesome story, man. Take us through your journey a little bit, and like how did you become the breath guy? And maybe that this is me just not being entirely in your world. Maybe you're not seen as that, but from looking at a lot of your stuff and preparing for this, it looks like that's a huge focus of what you guys do.
It certainly is. I think breathing is the foundation behind everything we do at XPT. I think it's the most powerful thing that we do and the most impactful, because it's applicable to everybody. So there are people, you know, we teach it to kids programs, and we teach it to elite military special forces units who come out to Laird and Gabby's to learn some of this stuff. So it's super cool because we can work with everyone across the spectrum. But yeah, I think breath work is certainly one of the biggest things that I dove into. And probably the other reason that I know a lot more about it was I was already exploring breath work for a few years before XPT. I had a friend who started teaching me some stuff. So I worked a lot with combat sport athletes. So I was always looking at ways that we can improve our recovery in between rounds. We can optimize everything about the process. So I had already been doing some breathing and learning of breath work from a performance standpoint. I had ignored a lot of it because a lot of it was just packaged wrong for me. A lot of it was packaged in the yoga type things. And because there wasn't science, no one was presenting me with the science and the performance arm of it, I ignored it. But when I joined XPT, my job was to understand all of it. So I just dove in head first, and breathing was the biggest thing that I dove into. The pool training, of course, I had to learn, but there's not nearly as much physiology and applications for that as there is for the breath. So I dove in and learned it I've probably read 15 books, taken 8 certification courses, worked with most of the leading experts in the world when it comes to breath work to understand their approach. And I think for me, the reason that I found it to be so impactful, or the reason I loved what we do at XPT, was all of these people I was learning from all kind of had an approach. It was like trying to learn physical training and going to learn from like a squat guy and then like a powerlifting person and then a mobility person. But you had to learn all of those things and then understand that, but I'm working with humans. So how do I put the mobility with the squat and the powerlifting and the speed training? Like, how can I put that all together? And what I found, I couldn't find that in breath work. Here's the yoga things. Here's the Buteyko method. Here's the Wim Hof method. But everything was very segmented. So my goal was to understand the full spectrum of breath work and try to create something that was really comprehensive to help people understand the way we do with exercise. How do I use this breathwork pattern? How do I use this one? How do they apply to different people? What are they doing from a physiology and a psychology perspective? So that's pretty much what I've done. I spent 10 hours a day for the first year just learning and applying this stuff with my athletes so that I could tinker things and figure out what works. And obviously we know reading 300 research studies doesn't always correlate to what actually works. I was fortunate I still had a handful of athletes that I was training to test it out. But that's the thing I speak about the most. And honestly, it's the thing I'm the most passionate about because I think it's the most impactful for the most amount of people. I think the ice baths and the pool training is all amazing, but not everybody has access. Everybody in the world has access to breath work, and it literally can help everybody. So that's why I think it's I'm the most passionate about it.
Yeah, the exact reason that it was so interesting to you is why I reached out to you. Like, when do I do Wim Hof? When do I meditate? When do I do box breathing? When do I do pranayama from the yoga traditions? That manual doesn't exist out there before you guys. So I'm super fired up to have this discussion. What's the biggest difference you've seen intentional breath work have on someone's life or performance?
That's a great question. I think the differences are really similar, but just applied in different levels. So I think I'll give from a performance standpoint. I train UFC fighters, and one of the guys I was working with really bought into all the protocols that we did at XPT, the ice baths, the pool training, everything. And his biggest problem when he came to me was conditioning. He said he had won all his fights before the UFC. He got in the UFC and he was always winning the first rounds. Usually the second round was hit or miss, and he was losing third round. He had never won a third round in his UFC career, and he was losing fights because of it, because the second round would be hit or miss. And then he would, if he always lost the third, it was a crapshoot on if he was winning. So he lost a few, won a few, but he said he had a big conditioning problem. And what I saw really early on was he had a energy management problem. He goes all out 100%, doesn't know how to calm himself down, super emotionally driven. Like when he's in a fight, he's in a fight. When the bell rings, it's life or death fight, but you can't do that for 15 minutes. So working with him, teaching him, and it was holistic. It was all of the things we were doing. We're teaching him how to control his mind, how to use his breath and all this stuff. But I remember probably the best fight he's had in the UFC, where he dominated the third round against the current champion, Israel Adesanya. It was a really close fight that he had, I think one of his best performances. And he ended up dominating the third round against this guy, one of the best third round performances I've seen from him. And he told me before he walked out to the cage, he's like, man, I've never felt so calm and so focused and prepared when I walked in the cage. And all I was thinking my whole walk out there was 4-8. And that was the breathing protocol I had given him to use anytime he was feeling his emotions get out of control. And I was like, man, it's so, I bet he wasn't even doing the breathing protocol, but because he had practiced it and connected to it and the mindfulness of it, whatever he was doing from a breath standpoint was allowing him to stay calm and controlled and translate it into his performance, which I thought was amazing, and also amazing that he was able to recognize it. But I think just as impactful for me have been literally people I gave the same protocol to. I mean, I had a friend who reached out on Instagram and said, "Hey, I want to learn something about breath." And I was like, "Hey, try this thing out." She gave me no context. She just said she wanted to do something to calm down. She reached out 2 months later and she's like, "Hey, I know I didn't really talk about this, but I was having really severe anxiety. Like I could barely leave my house. I was having a lot of issues. And that breath protocol you gave me literally changed my life." And I was like, man, I literally sent her 3 sentences on breathing. Like, "Hey, just try this one out," because I get so many DMs from people asking random questions, and I try to respond and help people as much as I can. But obviously I can't write you a dissertation on breathing for every DM. But that was super impactful here as well, that this changed this girl's life. And she was able to overcome this anxiety just with this breath. And I'm sure there was a whole bunch of other things, but the breath was the catalyst that helped her to connect everything together. So I think, and the funny thing is they were doing the same protocol.
Yeah, that's great. There's this anecdote that I love. So Marcelo Garcia, for those of you who don't know, is arguably the best grappler of all time. And one of his students, Josh Waitskin, was describing watching him before like a world championship or something like that. And 2 minutes before he went out to start the fight, he was asleep. He was dead asleep. And it just cemented in my mind this idea or concept that elite performers they know how to turn it all the way down and calm their nervous system down as much as possible so that they can stimulate and arouse themselves to the maximum. And so often people that are novice or intermediate or even advanced just don't have that same level of regulation. And the breath is the foundation of that sort of regulation. So we're going to talk about how you can start to work yourself towards that type of performance. So let's prime people before we do this first exercise. Give us a little bit of a reminder on sympathetic versus parasympathetic nervous system, and just give us a little bit of context for what we're about to do.
Absolutely. So when it comes to sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system in general, sympathetic is what we refer to as our fight or flight state. And it's really a cascade of physiological events. It's not an actual thing, but a sympathetic response is a cascade of events that create a stress response in the body. It's how we respond to anything stressful. So increased blood pressure, heart rate, perspiration, all of those stress responses. It's not always a bad thing because we think about that as a bad thing. It's also how we exercise and how we do things at a higher intensity. It's reserved for us to put out higher intensity efforts. And then the parasympathetic is where we're supposed to spend most of our lives, which is our rest and digest state. And that's where we can just kind of cruise. That's our homeostasis. And then we should be there. That's where we actually get better from everything we do in the sympathetic state. We use that state to create the stress response. And then parasympathetic state is where we actually recover and regenerate and get better from those things. So both super important. And as you mentioned, being able to regulate them is the difference between the most elite performers. UFC fighters, as an example, nobody on the planet can fight for 25 minutes in a sympathetic state. The most elite literally can flick that switch and go 8 seconds all out punching, turn it back off and move around the cage, and then go again and again and again. And they can do that repetitively. Whereas, amateur people, when you watch them fight, they're about a minute and a half and then they're gassed out and they can't lift their arms because they try to go sympathetic, and we use so many resources to be in that state that our body can't stay there. But a lot of us stay there way too long. So it's great to have different things that you can use to toggle that. And some people need it. I like what we're going to go through right now is kind of what I use as a morning routine. Because when I wake up, before I sit down and get my day started, I like to get a little bit ramped up, create some energy in the body, create some intention behind it. So, and it's also something I do pre-workout when I want to create a sympathetic state. So it's great to have these kind of things to use as a little remote control.
Cool. So I'm going to hand the reins over to you in a second, and then we will talk about like physiologically what just happened. So listeners, if you're in a place to do so, try to find a comfortable place to sit, ideally not driving again.
Yeah, you definitely don't do the one we're about to do. Don't do while you're driving, because it can create some dizziness and lightheadedness, and I don't want anybody crashing your car. So if you're driving right now, wait until afterwards to do this one.
All right, take us away.
So make sure we're in a comfortable breathing position I always prefer spine upright, because especially as we get into this first protocol, we're going to be breathing a little bit faster. And I always like to start off by telling people that we have to start with good mechanics first, because as we add reps and speed, it's going to tend to lead us into compensatory mechanics. So it's just like exercise. If you are really, really crappy running, when you start sprinting, everything that you do wrong is going to go wrong. So if we want to really make sure we establish some good mechanics. So I like to tell people to get in a good posture, preferably laying down on the floor with their knees bent, feet flat on the floor, so that your spine is supported and your pelvis is neutral. But if you're sitting, just sit upright. And then we're going to prep this protocol with a few breaths to just prep the breathing pattern. So it's going to be a few slow breaths where we're really going to focus on engaging the diaphragm and expanding the rib cage. So when I talk about inhaling, we're going to be breathing in, thinking about expanding. If you went from your sternum to your belly button and you had a belt around that section all the way around, as we breathe in, we're going to think about expanding that 360 degrees. It's not going to be perfect. If you've never done this stuff before, I guarantee as we start to increase speed, your mechanics will be off. But I always like to preface it with that, because I want people to not just take the exciting part and then forget about all the important foundational stuff. So we'll do a few light breaths at the beginning to set our foundation, and then we're going to start to increase the speed and the cadence, and I'll tell you how to do that. The other thing I like to tell people is, as we do some of these things, we're going to create changes in your physiology, and some of the sensations that you might feel a little lightheaded or tingly. A lot of people feel euphoric from these things, but if at any point you don't like those sensations or it becomes too extreme for you, stop the fast breathing and go back to light breathing through the nose, and that will restore everything back to its baseline. So we're not going to go crazy today. I'm not going to take you on some kind of crazy spiritual journey of breath work, because you can certainly do that with these protocols. But this is a really great kind of morning routine that I like to do. It'll take us probably about 5 minutes, and we're just going to kind of ramp up our energy. So let's start off breathing through the nose. And all I want you to do is take a few breaths, breathing slow through the nose and expanding the belly and ribs as you inhale. So you can close your eyes. You can be really internally focused here. Expand the belly and ribs out laterally. Fill up as much as you can, and then empty completely all the way out. No, not really any force behind the breath here, but I really just want you to feel the mechanics and feel the belly and the ribs expanding as you inhale. Shoulders and neck are nice and relaxed. And this is also just a great time to just start connecting to the breath. And this is where I start to set my intention for this protocol. So if I'm doing this in the morning, I'm going to start to set my intention that when I finish this protocol, my energy is going to be ramped up. I'm going to be mentally focused. I'm going to be engaged. And I'm going to be ready to attack the day. And we're going to do 2 more of these breaths together. So go ahead and exhale all your air out. We're going to inhale slowly for a count of 10. Go ahead, inhale. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and hold. When I say exhale, we're going to exhale for a count of 10 through the nose, nice and slow. Exhale. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Inhale for a count of 10. 3, 4, 8, 9, 10, and hold. When we let go of this exhale, we're going to let it go through the nose in short, sharp, forceful exhales. So they're going to be short and fast through the nose. And I want you to think about driving your belly button into your spine like a pump. So it's going to sound like this. Almost as if you were trying to blow your nose, but very lightly. It's not as forceful as you can. Ready? Begin. just let the inhale rebound naturally. These aren't full breaths. They're just short, sharp breaths. Inhale's naturally just rebounding back in, and we're just driving that belly button to the spine. So really engaging, almost contracting the abdominals, and think about driving the belly button into the spine and just pumping the air out. A few more of those. Inhale through the nose and hold your breath. When we exhale, we're going to switch over to the mouth. We're going to exhale through the teeth. It's going to sound like this. Go ahead and exhale nice and slow. Inhale through the nose. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. We're going to speed this up now. In through the nose, out the mouth. In, out. In, out. A little faster now. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Keep it up. A little faster now. Increase that speed a little bit more. Fast as you can. Inhale and hold it. You may feel a little bit of sensations here, a little lightheadedness. Again, that's perfectly normal. Just relax on this breath hold. Exhale. Hold. Nice and relax. So as we increase the speed, we're feeling that energy increasing in the body, starting to crank up that sympathetic nervous system response. And then during this hold, we're plateauing off. And then we're going to crank back up and we're going to plateau. So think about bringing it up a level each time. And then we flatten out that level and then we increase a little bit more. Inhale through the nose. Exhale through the nose. We're going to go same thing through the mouth this time. So we're going to in through the mouth, out through the mouth. We're going to start slow. We're going to gradually increase the speed, and we're going to finish with a few really fast mouth breaths. So go ahead and inhale through the mouth and out the mouth. In, out. In, out. A little bit faster now. In, out. In, out. In, out. In, out. A little faster. In, out. Faster. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. Hold. We're going to extend this last hold here. Stay nice and relaxed. Inhale. When we exhale, we're going to let out an audible exhale out the mouth like you're sighing. Exhale. In. Through the nose on the inhale, out the mouth with a sigh. Last one. In. Out. Just return to normal breathing now through the nose. And you can open your eyes if you had your eyes closed. And that's it for our little ramp up morning protocol there, or energizing protocol.
Beautiful, man. Thank you. And for those of you listening, if you just did that exercise, I invite you to put this on pause and just observe what's going on in your body and your mind for, say, 30, 60 seconds without judgment. So put it on pause. Welcome back. All right. What just happened, man? What just went on in our bodies and our minds as we practiced that?
So a lot of physiology and psychology linked together there. We started off by connecting to the breath, which I find helps people get more out of the next thing. So I find that a lot of people who just jump right into the sympathetic protocols, the first or second round are kind of wasted because you're still connecting to the mechanics and everything. So I really like to start off with something that connects us to the breath. And I always like to get the mechanics, to use the mechanics to do that, because it helps us to set the foundation. I think about that, what we just did as a workout. So we started off with our warm up, which was just a few big breaths to connect to the breath and engage the diaphragm and get everything ready for the next protocol. And then we started with another short protocol, which was as we increase the speed, the more we start to increase the speed, that's directly tied to the part of the brain that increases sympathetic nervous system activity. The parts of the brain that regulate our autonomic nervous system, which is the parasympathetic and sympathetic we just talked about, are directly correlated and closely tied with the part of the brain that regulates respiration. As we start to increase the speed, if you think about any time you breathe fast, it's typically in times of stress. You're running, you're anxious, you're angry, that all of those things increase our respiratory rate, and therefore our brain is hardwired into feeling increased, I'll call it stress, but increased sympathetic activity when we start to increase the breath. So we did that really, really short and simple. And I like that first protocol because it also engages the abdominals and it gets people to start exhaling, which tends to be a problem. But when we can start to really engage the exhale, it helps us to inhale. So that was our first protocol we went through with those short nasal exhales. Then we switched over into in the nose, out the mouth. This allows us to start to increase the pace. And what this is called, we call this power breathing as we start to increase the speed and we go in the nose and out the mouth. So it's a big inhale and a forceful exhale. And all we did was start to increase the speed at which we did that. And every time we cranked that speed up a notch, we started to increase the energy in the body, which was the goal. But we also created some pretty big changes in our physiology. One of the big things that I'm sure most people felt was we started to change our blood chemistry around. So as you start to increase the speed, if you think about the body, the systems, all systems in the body are developed on balance. So when the respiratory system, one of the big balancing acts that we play is between oxygen and carbon dioxide. When the body's in homeostasis, we have a relative balance of those gases. As we start to breathe faster, because we don't need to breathe faster, we're not running where those gases are being changed, but we're starting to breathe faster than what our body needs. So we call it in excess of the metabolic demand. What we do is we start to decrease the carbon dioxide in the body. So we start exhaling more carbon dioxide than we need. When we do that, it changes around the chemistry of the blood, and we actually change the blood pH because carbon dioxide is acidic and oxygen is basic. So when those two are together, we hit that balanced blood pH of about 7.35, which is right around neutral. As we start to decrease the carbon dioxide, the acid, we change the blood pH. We now have an imbalance, so we start to become more alkaline. And a lot of those sensations that people felt are side effects of respiratory alkalinity, respiratory alkalosis, which is actually a bad thing. That in medical textbooks, that's a dysfunction that people have from over breathing, and they start to feel lightheaded and fatigued and tired all day because they're doing that all the time. But when we use it acutely, like we just did in these short terms, there can actually be a whole bunch of potential health benefits and effects. But one of the biggest ones there is just that sensation people feel, the euphoria. I won't go too deep into the hypoxia and the blood gases and all of that, because I think it'll take us 15 minutes to go through that physiology. But there are a whole bunch of benefits to changing our blood pH as well. They can lead to us being able to utilize oxygen more efficiently throughout the day and throughout workouts. But that's where people felt some of those sensations in terms of the lightheadedness, the tingliness, the euphoria, all of that stuff comes from that change in blood pH. So we did that on purpose. So every time we did that, we followed with a breath hold and then a few light breaths to balance those blood gases back out. So we didn't want to put people too far into an imbalance. Not that too far is bad, but that's just a different purpose. For our purposes today, I wanted to just keep it short and simple. So it was just enough to make a minor change in our physiology and increase our energy and our sympathetic drive, and then balance us back out. And I gave that reference of think about kind of elevating a level and then plateauing. So every time we increased the speed, we elevated the energy the next level. And then we took a minute to plateau there so that we didn't go too far. And then we switched over to the mouth, which just allows us to move more air. So it's going to change the demand a little more, change the respiratory gases a little more to create a little bit more of those sensations. But also mouth breathing tends to be very sympathetic, a very big sympathetic driver in most people, which is why we talk about not breathing through the mouth most of the time. But in this instance, we were trying to create that sympathetic effect. So we switched over to the mouth to really increase the speed and create that sympathetic effect. And then we followed with just a few breaths to balance it out. But I didn't do too much to bring us back down because the whole goal was to crank us up. So I wanted to leave that protocol feeling more energy. If it was just to kind of play with the whole spectrum, then I would have spent a few minutes bringing us back down. So we were kind of restored to a nice calm baseline. But we wanted to increase energy, so we stopped there.
As a recovered drug addict, I'm looking for that free high, man. I'm trying to get as alkaline as possible. Don't make me hold my breath.
Yeah,
that was great, dude.
Yeah, if you want to go really far with it, the longer you hyperventilate, the fast breathing, the more intense those sensations are going to happen. And then as well with the long breath holds, because you'll get a huge change in blood gas. I mean, we've seen people lower their oxygen percentage to in the 40s, which your normal blood oxygen saturation is like 95 to 99%, super high. Below 91% is considered hypoxia, which is low oxygen. And we've seen people with these hyperventilations drop down into 40s and 50%. But what I always tell people in our coaches course, we don't know yet if that's, I'm sure there's some benefit to it, which we've seen. I'm sure there's also some contraindications, which we haven't seen as much because it's just not something that's been intensely studied. I think it will be, because the more like the Wim Hof method and those things become popular, the more regular people are doing these things. That's great. I think most people are going to get a huge benefit, but I think there's also some of those faster, more intense breathing patterns that I always tell people you've got to earn those things. That's like a back squat. When you come to the gym and train with me, you've got to show me that you've got the requisite mobility and strength and body control to get to the back squat. And it's a great exercise and I can use it for a ton of things, but a lot of people I train don't get there. We split squat and we front squat and we do other things because they just don't have the foundation to jump right into the highest threshold stuff that we have.
Right. So if you can't regulate your life stressors and you're overtrained, you probably shouldn't be doing a bunch of Wim Hof breathing, or maybe you shouldn't be doing.
Yeah. And I would also say for most people, you should be learning the foundations of mechanics as well, because a lot of people overbreathe throughout the day, meaning they mouth breathe all the time. So they're breathing too much air in and out, and that'll change your physiology. The physiology change we just created, a lot of people have throughout the day. They have low carbon dioxide, so they're not using oxygen efficiently. And if that's you, and then you wake up every morning and you do 5 rounds of Wim Hof breathing or any type of hyperventilation, because it's not specific to only Wim Hof, but that's the popular one. But any type of fast hyperventilation breathing, what you're basically doing is setting yourself 10 steps backwards. And every morning you're waking up and you're building capacity on top of dysfunction. Mm-hmm. So same thing goes for if you have poor breathing mechanics. If you're a chest breather and a mouth breather and you don't have good access to your diaphragm and you wake up every morning and do 200 really fast breaths, it would be the equivalent of if you had really poor squat mechanics and you woke up every day and did 200 reps of squats. You wouldn't get better at squats. You would just get better at sucking at squats.
Right.
Because you're just reinforcing that. So I always tell people, like, those things are great if you can know how to use them, but you should always start with building the foundation first and then do the higher threshold stuff on top of a solid foundation.
So when is this good for and why? This type of protocol?
And now that I said that, like, the protocol we went through it's a much smaller version. So we only did, even those fast breathing patterns, we only did probably 15 breaths in total. So it's not going to be the end of the world if people do that. But even as I said at the beginning, if you were doing those 15 breaths and you were breathing way up into the upper chest the whole time with poor mechanics, if you were my client, I would tell you to stop doing it because we'd want to fix that first. But this type of protocol is a great thing to do pre-workout. It's a great thing to do as a morning routine if you're somebody who needs to get energized. Because I know people who get up in the morning and like they're just stressed immediately and they need to calm down. So for those people, I wouldn't do this protocol. Also, something I like to do midday, you know, when you hit that 2-3 o'clock slump and you just need 5 minutes to like disconnect your mind and reset your mind. The breath can be a great thing to do that, especially, and if you're someone who hits that slump and you're tired, something like this can be a great protocol. And I use very similar type protocols in all of like my midday energizer routines. But anytime you need a little bit of mental focus and energy, this type of protocol will be great.
Got it, man. Cool. Let's move on. Let's go to parasympathetic. I think we've gotten the context.
Yep.
Let's just roll with it.
Yeah. So the big thing parasympathetic is thinking about the triggers that help us to get into a parasympathetic mode. And a lot of the triggers that we have, nasal breathing is one, diaphragmatic breathing is one, extended exhales is another, hissing or humming on the exhales is another, supine positions, so laying down, or flexion positions is another one, mindfulness of the breath. So starting to be focus on the breath. I like to use counting of the breath to do a lot of that. All of these are parasympathetic triggers and shown in research, as well as breathing in about 4 to 6 breaths per minute is another really good one. So when I do down regulation protocols, I try to use as many of those as possible. And you don't have to use all. Like sometimes you'll do a different one, but the one we're going to go through right now, we're going to take advantage of a handful of those. And this is the protocol. One of the protocols I use in the ice bath or in times of stress, and I also teach to people. So we're going to start off all breathing through the nose. Again, if we hadn't just done a 6-minute or an 8-minute breathing protocol, I would spend a few minutes connecting to the breath and just getting everything solid baseline. But we're going to move past that since we just did that. But we're going to start off just going with me on a count. So I want everybody to go ahead and just close your eyes again. All through the nose right now, I want you to just exhale all the air out and inhale with me for a count of 4, 2, 3, 4, and hold. And exhale. Inhale. 2. Hold. Exhale. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. I'm going to slow it down now. Inhale for a count of 7. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Hold. Exhale for 7. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. Back to light breathing through the nose. And as we shift into this next protocol, we're going to start to really extend the exhales. We're going to start making some noise on the exhale. The first one, we're going to breathe from the back of the throat. Think as if you were trying to fog up a mirror, the noise you would make as you breathe. We're going to do that same thing, but we're going to keep the mouth closed. So it's going to come The air will come out the nose, but I'm still breathing from the back of the throat. It's called the ocean breath exhale. So it'll sound like this. I want you to really focus on making some noise with it and just extending that exhale out. So we're going to inhale for a count of 5. We're going to pause at the top, and we're going to exhale out with that ocean breath. So go ahead and just exhale all your air out and inhale with me for a count of 5. 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold. Make some noise with this one. Go ahead and exhale 10 seconds on the way out. Exhaling from the back of the throat. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. Using that ocean breath exhale. 8, 9, 10. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. 10. One more. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. Back to light breathing through the nose. We're going to do 2 more long, slow breaths, and I want you to use 2 things on this one. We're going to use a mantra that I like to use on the exhale. So what you're going to do is inhale for a count of 5. You're going to hold for just a few seconds at the top, just enough time to bring to mind this mantra, and you're going to say, just let go. And then on the exhale, you're going to slow the exhale down as much as you can control. You're going to count this one on your own, and you're going to exhale through the teeth and make a hissing sound. So it's going to be like this. Think like you poked a hole in a tire or a balloon. You're just leaking the air out. I want you to do 2 of those breaths on your own. So it's an inhale for 5. It's a hold at the top. You're going to say, just let go. And then you're going to count how long you can exhale for with that hissing exhale. So go ahead and everybody inhale now for 5, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold. Just let go. Hissing exhale. As slow as you can. When you get to the bottom of that exhale, just pause for a few seconds and do 1 more of those breaths on your own. In for 5, pause at the top. Slow as you can on the way out with that hissing exhale. When you get to the bottom of that hissing exhale, you can just return to light breathing through the nose. Then you can open your eyes. If you're asleep, wake up, because we're going to have a good conversation here. You're going to not want to miss it. That's a little down regulation protocol.
Beautiful, man. And again, I invite you to put this on pause for just a few moments and notice what's going on in your body and in your mind, and notice if there's any difference from earlier. Okay, welcome back. PJ, thank you for that, man. As you could see, I was practicing some of it. I didn't want to make any noise, so I skipped that part, and I didn't want to be too monk-like when we picked this back up. What just happened?
So what we did there, and I mixed it together a handful of some of my favorite techniques for getting people to down regulate, because I wanted people to take them away. So we started off with just nasal breathing, connecting to the breath. We slowed it down. We actually used a protocol that's based in a ton of research. It's actually one of our protocols we use for our military and first responders. What we did is, I adapted a little bit. We did a 4-second inhale, a brief pause, and a 6-second exhale. And that was the first protocol we went through. And that put us at just about 4.5 to 6 breaths per minute, depending how long we did the holds for. And that falls right into that category where a whole bunch of research studies have shown to be our most optimal breathing cadence for homeostasis. And it depends on the person. Some people are 4.5, some people are 6.5. So I always say breathe for about 5 to 7 breaths per minute. So we started off with that one. And if we found that most people, sorry, not we, I didn't do the research, but in the studies, they found that the frequency at which our cardiovascular systems and the rest of our systems vibrate directly align with approximately that frequency of breathing. So when you match those things together, it's where our body can be in the most homeostasis. So they were measuring things like HRV, blood pressure, heart rate. Can't remember what else, but I remember that was the most significant effects. We started with that, still using some of those same triggers. We were nasal breathing, we were diaphragmatic breathing, we had the extended exhales, and then we shifted into a triangle breathing protocol, which was a 7-second inhale, 7-second hold, and a 7-second exhale. We call it triangle because it's an equilateral triangle where all sides are the same. So it's basically the same as a box breathing, but we removed one of the sides. A lot of people are familiar with box breathing, which is just equal part inhale, hold, exhale, hold. So we just removed the hold on the end. And we did that I like to do that to extend the exhale. I find that, again, there's more research on an exhale for more than 7 seconds is a huge parasympathetic trigger. So that's why we did the 7-7-7. The reason I don't do a 7-7-7 box protocol is I find that a lot of people struggle to maintain. Once we get to 7 or 8 seconds, it becomes a pretty significantly challenging box for people to do. So I like to use that triangle, and we can manipulate that however we want. Then we went into the ocean breath exhale. So we started to use a 1-to-2 ratio of inhale to exhale, which is, again, one of my favorite. I mentioned earlier, my UFC fighter was doing a 4-8 protocol, 4-second inhale, brief pause at the top, 8-second exhale. That was his down regulation protocol he was using. Also inhaling through the nose and exhaling with that hissing. But we did an ocean breath exhale first because I just wanted people to learn that, because it's also another one of my favorites. It's actually what I use in the ice bath most of the time. The vibration created in the throat and the mouth and the lips also helps to stimulate the vagus nerve, which is responsible for helping us get into a parasympathetic state. But I also find that it helps people to connect to the breath mentally. So it gives your mind an anchor point. When you start focusing on the sound you're creating, it gives your mind an anchor point. And when you start to use something audible like that, something that creates tactile feedback, the feeling you get in your throat, the vibration, as well as audible cues versus just the breath, the more you start to do those things. So let's say I use that exact protocol every time I'm stressed out and I want to downregulate, or just anytime I want to downregulate, my mind will start to create those neural associations between that sound, that feeling, and being relaxed. So it's then all of a sudden you may not, again, I mentioned, I guarantee you my fighter, when he was walking out to the cage, was not doing 8-second exhales. But the counting of that pattern, saying the numbers in his head, slowing the exhale down, all of those things had also been programmed into his physiology to create a relaxation response. So there's no like black and white line of, oh shoot, I didn't get that 7-second exhale, so now it's not going to work. So that's why we did the ocean breath exhales, and we did a 5-second inhale, a pause, and a 10-second exhale. So that was that 1-to-2 ratio of inhale to exhale, which is a big down regulation one. And again, I threw a bunch of these things in so I could tell people about them all. You don't need all of them. Mm-hmm. Any one of these things is all you need. And then you can always build on it. And then the last one we did was a hissing exhale, which is my other favorite that I like to do when I'm stressed out. But some people don't like it in public. So that's why I like the ocean breath, because you can kind of still do the ocean breath on an airplane and not everyone around you thinks you're a weirdo. But we did the hissing exhale. And for that one, I let people go as far as they want, because then it gives you it's a little mind distraction. So you start to count how long you can exhale for. And that's something I'll use post-workout. I'll just inhale for 4 or 5, exhale as slow as I can, and I'll just count the exhales. And it keeps your mind focused on it, keeps you mindful of the breath, and therefore takes your mind off of all the work I have to do after this workout and all the things that are stressing me out. And then I threw in a little mantra that I like to use. I use mantras a lot in my breathing because they're super impactful for this, particularly for keeping me calm in stressful situations. And I learned that at the bottom of Laird's Pool, that I needed positive self-talk and mantras, or I was not going to survive that. So I threw in one of my favorite mantras when I'm stressed out, which is just let go. So I'll use that in the breath hold, and then I'll keep saying it during the exhales as well. That's what we went through. A lot of stuff packed into that short protocol. But again, the biggest takeaway is that any one or two of those things will work. So if you just left with one thing I just said, practice that and keep practicing it, and you'll create those neural associations in your brain, and your body will start to get a relaxation response anytime you do that thing.
Awesome. And listeners, we'll give you a place to go to get a ton of free breathwork protocols from PJ at the end of this. What's the difference between one of these protocols and something like mindfulness meditation, where you're just focusing on the breath for 10 minutes?
So I'd say the biggest difference is, in a mindfulness meditation, you're focused on the breath, but you're not actually using the breath to create any specific responses. So what you're doing is basically distracting the mind from all other things and bringing it focused on one thing. And that can have a ton of benefits. For calming us down, which is what a lot of it's used for, but also for training the mind to not be distracted. There's a ton of benefits for meditation. I do both. What I find is that the breathing is a great meditation for non-meditators, because it gives you something to focus on the whole time. But again, the end goal is you do want to be able to get to the point where you can literally just be present and not need to count breaths and count things, because those are distractions. But it's a huge step in the right direction, because a lot of people don't meditate because they do the first 5 days on some app, and then they're like, I don't think I was doing it right. I can't get past 5 minutes. But what I find with people with breathing, I mean, we have people come to these, I'll lead breathwork sessions, and people come who've never done any breathing. And I guide them through a 40-minute breathing protocol. And they're there, present the whole time, because I'm changing things, they're engaged, they feel sensation. So it creates a lot to keep your mind focused and keep you mindful. So I think it's a really, really great practice. And then me personally, I link those things together. So if I'm going to meditate, I always start off a meditation with a few minutes of breath work. So I'll kind of I'll basically go through a combination of two protocols we just did. Mm-hmm. I'll do something low threshold. I'll do something that kind of increases the intensity and the energy and the sensations and all that. And then I'll do something else that brings me down to a calm state. And then I'll just let it go. And what I find is, if I do 5 to 7 minutes of breath work, I can meditate for 25 minutes and I forget about it. If I try to meditate for 10 minutes, I'm like checking my watch. It's only been 3.5 minutes. So I find that the breath work is a really, really good on-ramp to get me into a deeper meditation.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, man. I've been playing around with different combinations of all of these the last several months, and I've had deeper meditations. And I've just had so much fun playing around with the different states that the different protocols put my mind in. It's amazing.
Yeah, there's so much. I mean, people always ask, like, how should I breathe? It's like, this is such a foundational thing that it affects it. It's almost, I relate it to like, well, how should I eat or how should I exercise? But in reality, it's even more complex than that, because you're doing it every single minute. Most people are breathing 10 to 15 breaths per minute. People who breathe fast are breathing like 30 breaths a minute. And I already mentioned that the optimal is more like 5 to 7. But if you're doing this 20,000 times a day, there's so many ways you can play with it when you start to understand what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. So I want to be sensitive of your time and your schedule. So I've got a couple more questions and we'll get out of here. So as of the day we're recording this, we're still in the COVID-19 era. I'm in isolation. I'm not sure about you. We're in really uncertain times right now. People are feeling afraid, angry, they're grieving, they're feeling a lot of challenging emotions, many people. How does that set of emotions affect the breath? And then how does our breath in turn affect those emotions?
So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, because those two things are so related, and one just leads to the next without conscious control. When we feel any negative emotions, that tends to put us in a stressful state. As we get into stressful states, we tend to trigger into stress breathing patterns, which I mentioned. Mouth breathing, faster breathing. When we start breathing faster than we need to, based on the current state, the reason we breathe fast through the mouth is because we've exerted so much physical energy that our body needs to catch up and move a lot of air quickly to balance blood gases back out. But when we haven't actually disrupted blood gases because we're just psychologically stressed, but we start breathing in to match that, because our body doesn't know the difference between psychological stress and physiological stress. It's just stress. So we start having physical responses to try to match this psychological stress. And that creates massive dysfunction in the body. And because it's unconscious, and because I already mentioned those processes are hardwired together, when I start breathing faster, that tends to lead me into more stress, which then tends to make me breathe faster, which then leads me to more stress. So that's why it creates this snowball effect without any conscious control. Some of you may have felt this during that faster breathing protocol. If you have never really done that, or you've got some untapped anxiety or something, some people will get an anxious response from those breathing protocols. So there's people who don't like the faster breathing because it creates that feeling that they're uncomfortable with. So it's really important to have the tools to, one, understand what's happening, and then two, be able to stop that, be able to derail that train and get it back on the right track. And that's why some of the stuff we just went through, all of those down regulation things, are super important, because they work on both sides. They all have tons of physiological triggers to get us out of stress. But if the stress was psychological, right? Let's say it's fear. Fear is a psychological stressor. It doesn't exist in real space. It's all in our mind. Or anxiety, but it's still real. So we get this stressor and it creates a physical response. If I try to use only physical things to combat that physical response, but I still have this psychological stressor, it's still going to create stress in the body. So we have to do something to get the mind off of the stress while also triggering the body to relax. So that's why when we talk about mindfulness stuff, it's so important, because the mind was what was creating the stress. So we have to get the mind and the body together. And that's why the breath can be so powerful. And that's why some of those techniques I talked about, using the hissing so you can listen to it, counting the length of the exhales, any type of counting, and anything that brings your mind onto the breath allows you to then calm yourself down, because it's what we call a disassociative technique. That in psychology, it's disassociating from this thing that's creating stress, and then allowing your mind to then downshift because you're not in that state anymore. So super important for people to be able to do in the current times, for sure, but all the time. I mean, and I've been putting all these techniques to practice because I'm not as stressed on the fear side of things, but I'm working 10 times more than I ever have been. I don't get days off. We have a lot of things that we're producing right now. So I've noticed that I'm somebody who likes to be disconnected. On the weekends, I turn my phone off. At night, I stop checking, I check emails twice a day. I don't check my phone. I don't check text messages. I've programmed myself to be disconnected and be able to disconnect. I'm not able to do that right now because we're just balancing too many projects, and I'm fortunate to have a job. So I just keep going in, and I know that what I'm doing right now is not sustainable long-term. So I have to keep using, I remind myself, I have never used so much breath work and saunas and meditation, but this is forcing me to use all the tools that I have at my exposure that I've been teaching people, because I've always used them in like these specific instances of stress, but I've done a really good job of mitigating a lot of those things throughout my daily practice through having kind of routines. And now all of that being thrown aside, I'm having to use all the same tools that I teach people to use every day.
The 1 week tape challenge. I saw this on your Instagram, and I think I've seen Dr. Andy Galpin do this as well. Tell me about that.
Yeah, the mouth tape.
Yep.
So the mouth tape is actually something I got from Patrick McEwen, who's our breathing advisor and the author of the book, The Oxygen Advantage. Mouth taping is basically on the spectrum that Patrick McEwen works. It's from the Buteyko method. It's basically the really slow end of the spectrum. And he works a lot with people who have asthma, COPD, sleep apnea, breathing dysfunctions. But what they find is that most people tend to breathe more than they should, meaning in excess of metabolic demands. And a lot of it happens because we mouth breathe.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the big things that they teach from a foundational standpoint, and it's one of the first things I teach people, is that we are actually designed physiologically to breathe through our nose. But most of us have adapted to not breathe through our nose very often. Most people listening to this right now are probably thinking like, what? When I tell you that you should breathe through your nose during exercise, you're going to be like, what the heck? There's no way I can do that. So the mouth taping is actually something that we do at night, and it helps to reinforce nasal breathing when you sleep, because at rest, you should be breathing through your nose all the time. You should also be breathing through your nose at light and moderate intensity activity. So going for a jog, you should be able to moderate that through your nose all the time. Most of you probably can't right now, but you should. Even during higher intensity activity, you should have the capabilities of using nasal breathing because there's a ton of benefit to it. But one of the big problems is, even if you're really conscious of your nasal breathing during the day, if you go to bed and you breathe through your mouth, there's a whole bunch of problems with that. You don't get in your deepest levels of sleep because mouth breathing tends to be a sympathetic driver. So you're not getting your most restful sleep. You might wake up fatigued. You might wake up congested. People who have nasal congestion tend to be mouth breathers because a little congestion leads you to mouth breathe, which also leads to more congestion. So nasal breathing is super important, and the mouth taping thing is something that helps to reinforce breathing at night. Now, I don't recommend if people hear this and they're like, oh, I should try that, and they duct tape their mouth shut. The mouth tape that we use is just a gentle reminder for your lips to stay shut. It doesn't force them shut. So Patrick actually has his own tape called Myotape that he has on his website. I haven't used that one. I know he just came out with it. I've used a brand called Somnifix, Somnifix. I might be spelling it wrong, but
something like that.
Yeah.
Google mouth tape.
Yeah, Google mouth tape, and you can find it. But they're like little strips you put on at night, and it's a great thing. It's something that I did for like a month and a half, 2 months, which is funny because I was like, I don't wake up with a dry mouth. I don't think I mouth breathe at night. And then I started doing that and started realizing how much better I was feeling after a few days. And then it made me very aware of when I do mouth breathe. So what I noticed was I was feeling fine. And then I started traveling a ton. And every time I'd go to a new city, I'd wake up the next morning in the hotel with a dry mouth. And because I had reset my foundation and I knew what it felt like when I woke up normally, I was very aware of how that travel stress was changing my breathing pattern and my sleeping pattern. So and now I bring them with me whenever I travel, and I use them whenever I travel. But I always recommend people to try it out for a week or two and see how you feel. I've had people who, again, they try it out and they're like, dude, I've never slept so good in my life. Maybe there's a placebo there. I don't know. I don't personally think it's going to massively change everyone's lives, but there are people who swear by it. I certainly think it's a huge tool to help reinforce nasal breathing. And then I will actually do it when I work out sometimes too. You don't have to tape your mouth, but it's just a reminder. But it'll force you to breathe through your nose, and you'll adapt. Your body will adapt. It'll be really hard at first and really weird, but your body will adapt.
Yeah, we used to do some row workouts, breathing only through our nose. It's pretty brutal.
It's terrible at first.
But it's a really cool way to, one, for all of the physiological benefits that you get from nasal breathing, but also it seemed to be like a great opportunity to observe what was going on in our minds, at least for me personally, which it has a whole host of other benefits. Dude, let's get out of here, man. Where can people find more of your breathing protocols? Tell them about the app.
Yeah, the best place to find anything, we created an app at XPT where we have guided protocols. So just like I took people through here, but we have probably 100 of them on there, and they're set up for different time intervals. So sorry, not time intervals, different use cases. So there's multiple bedtime routines by me and by Gabby and by Laird. There's pre-workout, there's surf routines, there's morning routines. So you can kind of pick and choose based on how you want to use it. And each protocol has a different intention, but they're all just guided. There's some good music. You get to listen to me or Laird or Gabby or some of our team guide you through it. So that's called XPT Life app, and it's available right now just for iOS. But we're actually coming out with a new one that's going to be way better on the breathing side, and that'll be iOS and Android. But for now, It's just available on iOS, and it's XPT Life. And there's a free version of it, so there's a whole bunch of free protocols in there, and then there's more stuff on the paid version as well.
And do y'all have a code for these listeners? I know we were emailing back and forth yesterday.
We'll have a link directly for you, but I don't think there's a code for it.
Cool. Yeah, guys, you can check the show notes. We'll have a special link that you can go to for some kind of discount, I think, on membership, maybe something like that. Cool, man. Dude, this was a pleasure.
And then there's a ton of free stuff on XPT Life's Instagram too. We, especially right now, and we're literally putting out a different piece of content every single day. Breathing, movement, ice bath, all the XPT stuff. So there's a ton of free content on our Instagram. Crazy amount of free content that I'm churning out right now for people, but I think it's helping people. So as long as people are engaged and they enjoy it and it's helping them, I don't mind doing it.
Awesome, man. And I think you're on Instagram at PJ Nestler?
Coach PJ Nestler.
And that's Nestler. Dude, thank you so much for your time. This was awesome.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Take care, guys.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. Your journey towards better fitness continues. Head over to brutestrengthtraining.com to connect with Michael and his guests. Access links and resources mentioned in this episode, as well as bonus content exclusive to podcast listeners. That's brutestrengthtraining.com.